Welcome to the Doyenne of Death Podcast, funeral planning for those who don't plan to die. It's all about end-of-life issues and getting the conversation started about our 100% mortality rate. This series is hosted by Gail Rubin, certified thanatologist and the Doyenne of Death. A doyen is a woman who's considered senior in a group and knows a lot about a particular subject. Well, that's Gail. She knows all about creating the party no one wants to plan, a funeral or memorial service. She discusses the changes death can bring, and she'll make you laugh. This series includes episodes previously released as A Good Goodbye, a treasure trove of evergreen podcasts about funeral planning issues. This podcast reveals some of the mysteries and shares advice and tools that can reduce stress at times of grief, minimize family conflict, and help create a good goodbye. Remember, just as talking about sex won't make you pregnant, talking about funerals won't make you dead, and your family will benefit from the conversation. So, here to talk about the subjects we sometimes avoid is author, speaker, and the Doyenne of Death, Gail Rubin.
One of the most highly trafficked blog posts on the Family Plot blog is about Greek Orthodox funeral traditions. I've attended 2 such services, and they're quite beautiful. There's chanting, there's symbolism, and there are elements that are baffling for outsiders, and even baffling perhaps for members of the Greek Orthodox community who might not know their own traditions. I find that happens sometimes in other faiths that they don't know their own traditions, what the symbols stand for. And within the Greek Orthodox Church, there are many different services associated with funerals, and then there are different sects within the Orthodox Church. You have Greek Orthodox is probably the biggest, but there are other ones: Antiochian Orthodox, Carpatho-Russian Orthodox, Romanian Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, Serbian, and Ukrainian. And the number of Orthodox adherents in the U.S. is almost 4.2 million people. So we have a lot of people who are in the Greek Orthodox Church, and I am very pleased to help us find out more about Greek Orthodox funeral traditions. Father Conan Gill, who is with the St. George Greek Orthodox Church in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Welcome, Father Conan.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
I really appreciate you taking the time to help enlighten our listeners and the people who read my blog post about Greek Orthodox funeral traditions.
Happy to help. So,
when somebody dies in the Greek Orthodox Church, are there different services before they die? Is there such a thing like last rites, like the Catholic Church used to do?
No, we don't really we don't have last rites. I guess as far as like the Catholics, or as the listeners may think of that the Catholics do, the last rites in the Orthodox Church is really just living a life in Christ, and it would be taking communion and offering a last confession before passing. Mm-hmm. So that's basically it. But if you'd like me to talk a little bit about the service itself.
Yes, I understand. Sort of like as the Catholics do, you've got an evening service, maybe before the day of the funeral, but it's not a rosary. It's called Trisagion. Am I pronouncing that?
A Trisagion.
Trisagion. Okay.
It means thrice holy.
Okay.
3 times holy.
And so what happens with that, and on the day of the funeral, and then the burial afterwards?
Okay. Well, let me kind of walk you through kind of what an Orthodox funeral kind of ceremony service would look like. First off, I'd like to say that the funeral service itself that we see today goes back to the end of the 5th and the 6th centuries. So it's very old. But kind of the instructions of the church that the church gives us are as kind of follows. Like you said, the Trisagion Service is done on the evening before the funeral has customarily been held, and it's usually done at the funeral home, although it could be done at a person's home also. And then after that, it's not usually held at a church. Like if it was a priest that had passed away, the Trisagion could be held in the church itself, and the priest's body would stay overnight. But for a lay person, the Trisagion is usually done at the funeral home or at their personal home, and then the next day, the person is brought into the church, and the casket is carried in by pallbearers, preceded by the priest who is vested, and he carries a censer, and he chants Ios o Theos, Aisiros, or Holy God, Holy Mighty, and he chants this in a slow and somber cadence, and he kind of leads the casket and the pallbearers and the family into the church. And the casket is arranged on the solea, which is the area right above, right in front of the iconostasis where the icons are, and the head of the deceased person is facing west towards the congregation, but almost like this individual was standing up, attending the service himself or herself. And the feet are towards the Holy of Holies, the altar. And the interesting thing is that the casket should almost always be opened for the funeral unless the body is disfigured or not presentable, like in the case of an accident or fire, decomposition of the body or something like that. The casket is always open, and it's really to show the reality of death, and that kind of makes some people uneasy, and many people will ask that the casket be closed, but really for proper reasons it should be open. And it's at that point that the priest begins the funeral service, and he does so facing the congregation. The priest chants from the royal gate, the beautiful gate, facing the congregation. And at one point, he chants a song, a hymn called "Among the Saints," and the priest censes the body on all four sides, and then we hear some beautiful hymns by St. John of Damascus, and these hymns are chanted in the 8 modes of music which the church offers. And it's kind of an interesting thing because the priest, it's almost like the priest and the deceased are having a conversation with the congregation. And then after that, the priest will hear a reading from the epistle and the gospel. The priest will preach a homily, which is always on the theme of the resurrection. And no person is allowed to preach or say anything during the service itself. No eulogy is given. It's just usually a sermon on the resurrection. Eulogies can be given later on during the Macaria or something like that. But at the end of the service, the priest again leads the body, the deceased, out of the church, chanting, and leads the congregation to the cemetery, where we once again have a Trisagion like we did the night before. So, and then after that, there's usually a mercy meal, a Macaria.
And is that at the church or at someone's home?
The Macaria can be at either. Typically, they'll have it in the church hall, or they're welcome. Many people have it at a restaurant of their choice or at their home. It's pretty open as to where they can go with that.
Okay. And Now, a number of questions that have shown up on my blog pertain to what actually happens at the burial at the cemetery. Now, my understanding was that the sign of the cross is arranged on top of the casket out of, I don't know, earth or wheat?
Well, yeah, let me back up. Like during the funeral service itself in the church, there is a point after the sermon and before the casket is closed, the priest will come up and he will pour a small portion of oil and earth on the body of the deceased in the shape of the cross. It's usually over the heart, and the priest says, while he's doing that, he says, "Sprinkle me with hyssop, and I shall be pure. Cleanse me, and I shall be whiter than snow." And then he casts the sand or the earth on the body, saying, "The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world and all that dwell in it. You are dirt, and to dirt you shall return." He does that now. And that's kind of an interesting thing because, the oil is olive oil, and olive oil in the ancient world was used as an ointment of healing. If you were bruised or if you were hurt. In fact, I have friends that even today, when their son or daughter gets hurt, the grandfather, the papu, will even massage oil into their skin, like for a bruise or a cut or something like that. So it's always been seen as an agent of healing. But oil is also used. I mean, it's really to reaffirm a messianic sonship. We have the prophets in the Old Testament, and the kings and the queens who were anointed with oil to show their relationship. As royalty, and so it's used as a sign of preservation and to really reaffirm our chrismation and our baptism.
Great. Well, we're coming up on our first break, so we're going to take a short 2-minute break, and we'll be right back continuing our conversation with Father Conan Gill.
Gail Rubin, the Doyenne of Death, has been producing Before I Die festivals for years. These festivals get end-of-life planning conversations started by putting the fun in funeral planning. Outside-the-box activities break down barriers to discussing death and planning for our 100% mortality rate. And now, Gail has created the Before I Die Festival in a Box, the comprehensive guide to producing your own community festival. It includes everything you need to create a successful event: how to find sponsors, build a team, market the event, schedule speakers, topics for discussion, workshop ideas, and much, much more. To learn how to get your Before I Die Festival in a Box, visit beforeidiefestivals.com or call 505-265-7215.
Welcome back. We're continuing our conversation with Father Conan Gill with St. George Greek Orthodox Church about Greek Orthodox funeral traditions. So when we were going to the break, you talked about in the funeral service the casket, unless the body has been disfigured, the tradition is to keep it open the whole time. That's very interesting because I've noticed at most other churches during the service itself, the casket gets closed, but maybe they'll open it up again at the end.
Yes.
And is there a tradition also of people who are attending the funeral filing past the casket and, paying their last respects to that person?
Yes, for sure. The Orthodox Church, they understand that the body is very important. It's something sacred. It's the temple of the Holy Spirit. And so we give it a lot of respect. So at the end of the service, the congregants are allowed to come up and for a viewing, and to say, really, but even more than that, it's to give a farewell kiss, to say a prayer, and then to give condolences to the family. But the church is very interested in people understanding the reality of death, that that it's there, that it's always present, it's looming. Not that we're to be taken back and to be emotionally destroyed. We're to grieve as though we're not to grieve as those who have no hope, but we have a hope in the resurrection. But we are to come to terms with what is going, and that that we have to live our life in a godly way, following our understanding of what it means to be Christians. But it is open, and a lot of people do want to close the casket, and they want to put a lot of make sure there's a lot of makeup on the body, and if it even people look better dead oftentimes than they did while they were alive. It's kind of strange or hard to recognize them, but if you go into the old countries, I mean, people there, when they pass away, they're buried within a day or two, because they're not being preserved, they're not being embalmed. So one of my friends, they're in Greece or in the old countries, like Romania and Russia and this kind of places. When a person passes away, it's time to do the funeral, so it's very close, and the family sees people turning all different colors, because they're not going to put all the makeup on them and this kind of thing, and they light the incense so there's not a smell, but it's kind of important because it gives you a touch of reality. Not really kind of the way we do things in this country, where we just try to throw a bunch of makeup on it and hide it, hide away the reality.
But here in the United States, embalming is done on the bodies. Is the funeral done quickly or within a week, or what kind of time frame do you look at?
Right, and I would say I'm not a funeral director, but my understanding is that a person does not have to be embalmed, and
right,
if something is going
refrigerated, yeah.
Right, they can be refrigerated, and that is oftentimes the case. I've had many funerals where the person wasn't embalmed, and it was okay. We could still open the casket and that kind of thing. If there's big problems, like unfortunately I buried a young teenage girl who had been ravaged by cancer, and it was very hard for the family, and they had seen her waste away for so long. They requested that the casket not be opened, and I followed that request. But at the end, of course, I have to open the casket to do the anointing, but we didn't allow a public viewing, which is fine. So we try to be understanding to what the needs and the situation of each family is also.
So,
but the interesting thing is, one thing I didn't touch upon is, in the old country, in Greece and this kind of thing, a person is buried, and I think it's for three years, and of course they're not embalmed. And after 3 years, the body is taken out of the ground, and the bones are washed in, I believe it's olive oil and wine, and then it's put in the family sarcophagus. So
somebody asked about that, and I was like, well, I know that the Victorians used to dig up a body after a year and kind of just look death in the face, but they actually do that. And do you know the reasoning behind that?
Yes. The reason is because it's through that process that oftentimes someone is found out to be a saint. In fact, we have many instances where someone is buried for a number of years, and their body simply does not deteriorate, but emits a myrrh, a sweet-smelling oil, and that's one of the signs of sainthood, of blessedness. So many times, of course, there's usually other things surrounding that as well. It would be surprising for somebody who is a scoundrel to be maybe, or who we'd think is a scoundrel to be unearthed and to be pouring myrrh, but it could happen. So it's one of those ways that we recognize saints and the people, very holy people.
So is there then a process for naming these people saints?
Yeah, that's you know what? There's not like I think this week we had 2 popes named as saints, and it's a very different process in the Orthodox Church than it is in the Catholic Church. In the Catholic Church, it's very systematic, and in the Orthodox Church, it's not like that at all. It's oftentimes more of a grassroots kind of effort, but there's no set procedure, which is very interesting, I think.
Well, and the icons that are decorating the church, I'm sorry, what did you call that part of the church where all the icons are located?
Yeah, the icons are located on the solea.
Solea, okay. Now, those would be your more old-time traditional saints, I'm guessing.
Well, they actually follow, there's a formula to where the icons are in the church, how they're situated, and especially so on the iconostasis. It's, if you find the royal gate, which is that center gate, they're the biggest one, and you always look to the right, you will always have the icon of Christ. And to the left of that gate, you will always have an icon of the Theotokos, which is Mary holding the Christ child. And if you go to the left of Mary, you always have the Theotokos, you always have the icon of the church. So if you walk into St. George and you find the Theotokos and you look to the left, you'll always see the icon of, if you're in St. George, you'll see St. George. If you're at Holy Trinity, you'll see Holy Trinity. If you're St. Nicholas, you'll see St. Nicholas. And then going back to the other side, you have Christ, and then always to the right is John the Baptist. And then to the other side, you have the deacon's doors, and those are always the angels, Michael and Gabriel. But after that, the icons can really be, can be really anything. The formula ends.
Now, do icons play a role in the funeral observations?
Well, they're always there. We're looking at them and they're looking at us. With a funeral, we will take out an icon of the resurrection. So that will always be placed close to the casket. And when people come up to give a last kiss or to say a prayer over the newly deceased, they will be given a chance at that time to venerate the icon of the resurrection.
Okay.
So it reminds us, it gives us, a reminder, even at these times when it seems, things seem so hopeless and sad, what we're looking forward to is the resurrection.
One of the questions that had been posted on the blog was, is there an equivalent to making a contribution for a Catholic Mass card? And we only have about 2 minutes till our next break, but I'm not sure if there is any equivalent with icons or.
Can you tell me what is a Mass card? I'm not sure that I know what that is.
Well, I know when I've gone to Catholic funerals, you get a card that's got a little prayer on the back, and usually on the other side, either an angel or some of their, but I'm guessing maybe that's sort of like making a contribution to the church.
I don't know. People will do a card oftentimes that will have the person's maybe, the Lord's Prayer, the person's favorite memory verse on it on one side, or a little bit about that person, and on the other side, there typically will be an icon. Mm-hmm. An icon of Christ or an icon of the resurrection, something like that. But that's not within. That's outside of really the funeral. There's no rubrics about that. That's something extra.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But they'll have something.
Okay. Well, we're going to head into another break here, and when we come back, we will continue our conversation with Father Conan Gill with St. George Greek Orthodox Church about all the fascinating aspects of Greek Orthodox funerals, and as well as the religion. I'm learning a lot here today.
Good.
I really appreciate it. We'll be right back. You're listening to A Good Goodbye, Funeral Planning for Those Who Don't Plan to Die.
Gail Rubin, the Doyenne of Death, is the author of 3 award-winning books. In A Good Goodbye, Funeral Planning for Those Who Don't Plan to Die, learn how to save money, reduce family conflict, and minimize stress at a time of grief. Just as talking about sex won't make you pregnant, talking about funerals won't make you dead, and your family will benefit from the conversation. Kicking the Bucket List, 100 downsizing and organizing things to do before you die, brings a light touch to downsizing and organizing for end-of-life issues. And Hail and Farewell, Cremation Ceremonies, Templates and Tips, helps you easily create meaningful memorial services with sample scripts, suggested readings, and music recommendations. These fine books by Gail Rubin, The Doyenne of Death, are available on Amazon and wherever books are sold. For more information, visit agoodgoodbye.com.
Thanks for listening. This is part 1 of our 2-part episode. Stay tuned for part 2 coming next week.
Thank you for joining us on the Doyenne of Death podcast. You can find episodes of this podcast and past episodes of A Good Goodbye with Gail Rubin on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. For more information on Gail's work, visit agoodgoodbye.com.